Hi, this is the sixth and last video I'm going to make. Certainly appreciate anybody that's still listening. This one is called Southlake and self-policing. I've already mentioned self-policing before. Southlake is really kind of a placeholder. Southlake, Texas, that's where I live. I've lived here for the last 25 years. Raised my kids here. It's just been a wonderful community. Although the last 6 or 7 years we've had some challenges. But the story I'm going to tell you about Southlake, it's really a placeholder for Christianity. In the previous video we talked about democracy and capitalism, and the backstory of this video is about Christianity and what kind of hold it has on our how we conduct ourselves as a society, and where is it leading. Let me start with a story. It happened about 3 or 4 months ago. A friend of mine works at is a member of a local, one of the big Methodist churches in town. He's helping set up houses or apartments for immigrants that's coming over, and I think we were setting up for an Afghan family that came in, and he gave me a call. He called me and said, "Hey, could you come and help?" And he knew that my wife and I have worked for the last almost 2.5 years with a couple immigrant families from the Central African Republic, and that's been very rewarding. So he says, "Hey, go over to this lady's house, and she's got 2 trucks. You drive one, and we'll meet you at the storage facility where we'll get the furniture and take it over to the apartment." I said, "Yeah, sure." So I go over and meet the lady, and we get in the trucks and we drive over. And we got there a little bit early, and so this lady and I started chatting a bit, and she says, "Hey, you kind of look familiar. Were you on the city council any time here in Southlake?" And I said, "No," but then I said, "I remember. Oh, I was on the drug and alcohol prevention committee. Oh, it was about a dozen years ago or longer. And I was on that for 3 or 4 years." And she said, "Oh, I was on the city council, and I was your city council representative on the committee." I said, "Oh, yeah." And I remembered it, and we kind of talked what we'd accomplished. And we both said to each other, how much we enjoyed working with each other. And then we kind of like rolled our eyes and said, "Can you believe what's going on now in the city council?" And we didn't say anything about that, but we both knew what we were talking about. I mean, it's just incredibly ugly. So I was driving home, and I was thinking about the conversation I had with her after we set up the apartment and stuff. And so 15 years ago, when I worked on her, there was like a committee of, I think there's like 5 or 6 of us, and then there was a city council rep. And we were trying to make sure that the kids, weren't doing drugs or drinking and driving, those type of things. And we had some projects, and it was your basic citizens coming together to take care of their families, and it was great. And I thought about it. I never once thought to ask whether Darla, the city council member, was a Republican or Democrat. I never thought to ask any of the other 5 or 6 people that were volunteering on the committee whether they were Democrat or Republican. Never thought to ask which church they went to or anything. It never came up. I still don't even know whether Darla was Democratic or Republican. I kind of think we were probably both Republicans, because Southlake was mostly Republican, except for my wife and lots of friends. But 15 years ago or a dozen years ago, just wasn't an issue. We were just all members of the community trying to, make sure we were raising our kids in a healthy community, which we were. Now, fast forward, guess what we're doing? Our city council and our school board is in absolute lockdown with these conservative Christian crusaders and what I called in a previous video Bolsheviks. They just want to tear things down. Here's an example. Just happened, I think, less than 6 months ago. A citizen in the Bolshevik camp sued teachers over her faith because the teacher had sent home a book that they didn't think was appropriate. Now let's just think about that for a second. A book comes home that this parents didn't think was appropriate. They could have sent the book back to the school. They could have said to the teacher, hey, I don't really like these kind of books coming home. There could have been a myriad of things that they did. Did they do any of that? Nope. They sued the teacher over their faith. And you know what the school board did? They agreed with them and upgraded it. Suing teachers? What the hell are we doing? We need to support teachers. We need to support our police. We need to support our nurses and healthcare workers. These are the people that are working in our communities to take care of us and our children. But no, not in North Texas. This is the home of the Tea Party. We got God on our side. We got all these mega churches out there. Let me just stop right there. Let me pick up the Bible. I'm going to read from Matthew 22, starting at verse 34. Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question: Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the laws and the prophets hang on these two commandments. It really, I'm participating Christian. I go to the Presbyterian Church, which I'm sure these evangelical wacko Christian crusaders considered Christian light, or not even Christianity at all. But why do they think they have a right to weaponize God and Jesus? And why are they so damn sure they're the chosen ones? Let me read some more. We're now in Matthew 23. I'm going to start at verse 15 and then bounce around a little bit. Woe to you, teachers of the law, you hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to win a single convert, and then when it becomes one, you make him twice as much a son of hell as you are. Down to verse 23. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give 1/10 of your spices, mint and dill and cumin, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law: justice, mercy, and faithfulness. 25. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside you are full of greed and self-indulgence. 27. Woe to you, teachers of the law, you hypocrites! You like whitewashed tombs which look beautiful on the outside, but the inside are full of dead men, bones, and everything unclean. Inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You build tombs for your prophets and decorate the graves of righteousness. I tell you the truth, all this will come upon this generation. Here in Southlake, the churches with the conservative Republicans have everything, have our city council, which by the way, arrested a fellow city council member that wasn't a Democrat because they texted, two Democrats texted each other, and they didn't text the whole thing, and Open Skies law said they have to tell everybody. So they arrested her. Here's an, we had an incident in Southlake, and yeah, I'll tell you what it was. And by the way, there's NBC, I believe, has done a podcast of Southlake, 6 episodes, and it's all true. And no one from the Christian Crusaders party would even talk to them because they're cowards. They just get in their echo chambers, and they won't come out, and they just come out and tell everybody how they're going to act or what they're going to do. So we had an incident where a couple of the kids made a video, and it was, now hell, I might as well just say it. They were singing "Nigger, nigger, nigger, nigger," and it went viral. And then, we've got to do something. So I think they were appropriately embarrassed and thought something was wrong. And so they started a diversity effort. You know, they were going to get a plan together. And sure enough, there was over 100 kids that came forward that said they had been harassed from these Christian radicals running around. One of them was my neighbor's daughter. She has a medical condition that sometimes she has trouble speaking properly. I have trouble speaking properly, but it's not a medical condition. She did. And she could be a little awkward in situations, but she was a beautiful, young little girl. And but she stood in front of the school board and explained how she'd been harassed. And so they had over 100 kids do this. They were harassed from these Christian Crusaders and conservative Christian Crusaders. And, you know, so they're working on a diversity plan, and we had, at that time, we had some people that come forward that were qualified to work on the plan, and they were. And then the George Floyd incident happened. And that all stopped. We still to this day don't have a diversity plan. And then they started backing off, and they were worried about, we don't want the white kids to feel ashamed. They even said it. How did I know that a George Floyd incident changed everything? Because at the time, well, I still do, I've been participating in a men's Bible study for about 20 years now. And right now I'm kind of leading it, and I have been an active member for the last 5 years or so. It really has helped me with my faith walk. I really love those guys. When the George Floyd accident or incident occurred, and no, in my mind, the police officer killed George Floyd. And my wife and I participated and some protests against that. But by at that time we were still on Zoom, and I think I was leading the Zoom call when this happened, and I was stunned because there's about a dozen men, dozen 15 at any time, my age, yeah, all white, wonderful people. I've known them for a long, long, long time, but it was stunning. You could just see the group went like this. You could either support the police or you could support George Floyd. But you couldn't do both. I was like, well, wait a second. I think it was murder. It was murder. He murdered him. 2nd degree, 3rd degree, whatever it is, he murdered him. But of course I support the police. But you could not have those two thoughts in your head. You couldn't go down the path of Black Lives Matter or support the police. I'm like, anyway. Okay, I'm going to try to take this into self-policing. There is some good news. So, like I said, they arrested this, some families sued teachers. A horrible thing to do. And then all of a sudden, some lady showed up at the school board, and she gave them a ration. Anyway, she stood up and she said, "Listen, I have 3 kids, and I've voted for every one of you up there." So I assumed she was conservative, Republican, Christian. And she said, "That teacher has taught 2 of my kids. She's an outstanding teacher, and you're going to stop this shit right now." And they did. They backed off. That's self-policing. Now, somebody from my wife's side, Democrat, which we do have Democrats, a few, had done that. It had been attacking. They wouldn't listen. But when somebody stands up in your own tribe and stands up against the tribe, that's when you're the firewall. So that was really, I don't know who the lady is, but she really stopped Southlake from spiraling down. And hopefully we can build it back up and work together. I'm not sure. Another act of self-policing, Mike Pence, the vice president, last 4 years, certainly more conservative than I am. Certainly, I don't really support the way he has relationships with women in public. You know, he stand-up guy. I wish, I would like to be his friend, would like to be his neighbor, whatever, but more conservative than I did. When you had the January 6th attack, and those people, by the way, believed in what they were doing. You have to recognize that. It was Mike Pence it was the critical moment when we were either going to have democracy or maybe we weren't. And it was Mike Pence that stopped it. He was the one, he was in the hot seat. And he stopped it. Very critical. He should be Man of the Year. Let me talk about a few other, did a couple rants. One of them is the NRA. I'm a gun owner. In fact, I was trained on this gun because I carried it as an FFDO in the airplane when I was flying for about 7 years. FFDO is Flight Deck Officer So after 9/11, they trained some of his pilots to carry a gun in the cockpit, and in case somebody tried to come in the cockpit, you would go bang. I did it for about 7 years. Had about two weeks. No, it was 1 week of training. It was very intense, and we had to practice once a quarter, I believe, to stay current. Nobody. I support our Second Amendment rights to carry guns, but I do it with common sense. I bet you I heard, well, I was going to say 100 times, but that's probably not accurate. I'm sure I heard 20 or 30 times from my fellow first officers who were, most of them were gun owners. Obama's going to take our guns. Obama's going to take our guns. That was never going to happen. Obama was tired of going to funerals every 2 or 3 weeks where we'd killed a dozen of our kids or more. But the NRA wouldn't have any of that. The NRA used to be a fine institution. My father-in-law was a member of the NRA. And you know what they were? A lot of, they were outdoorsmen, they were sportsmen, and a lot of them, if I remember, I knew a lot of them growing up, they were they called themselves conservationists. They're out in the woods and said, we need to take care of the rivers and the countryside. And the other thing they were everyone I ever knew growing up, they took gun safety and gun training like a religion. When you handled a gun or you were around someone that was handling a gun, it had to be done properly. And then the gun had to be stored properly. That gun will go back, when I finish this demonstration or video, that gun will go back in my safe. What did the NRA do? The NRA just said, oh, Obama's going to take our guns. It's our rights. You know why the Founding Fathers put that in there? Yes, it is. This is the second one. And it was very important. It was important for the Founding Fathers to put it in. That's because in the Revolutionary War, when Washington was trying to get troops, he had trouble getting troops and he had trouble funding troops. So when the Founding Fathers wanted to ensure that each one of the states had a militia so that the federal government could call them up in case they got attacked again. And by the way, after the Revolutionary War, there was 3 countries that were a concern of coming to America. You already had the Spanish were already down in Florida. They were worried they might come back up. The French, who supported us in the Revolutionary War, maybe they like a little payback. Maybe they would come back and ask for some land. And then you had the Brits, who did come back in 1812 and burn down. Oh, yeah, it's kind of like 1812 and then January 6th, yeah. That's why the Founding Fathers put all that in there. And the tyrannical government that the Founding Fathers talk about, that was England. That was King George. I bet you I've heard half a dozen times, gun owners, most of them with AK-47s or assault rifles, when they talk about the assault rifle, I have it because to protect myself against a tyrannical government. Kiss my ass. The U.S. government's tyrannical. You have no idea what a tyrannical government is. You've made that shit up in your head so that you can carry an assault rifle, which, by the way, we have, I think since the ban went away in 2004, there's like 20 million assault rifles out now. Thanks, NRA. We're going to be a violent society for years to come, no matter what we do now, because there's so many guns out there. and anybody that has a dark thought in their head will have access to a gun. And every 2 or 3 weeks, and you know something, just kind of a theme of this whole thing. You know who we're killing? Are we killing whites? Yeah. Are we killing blacks? Yeah. Are we killing gays? Yeah. Are we killing Jews? Yeah. So we have the diversity card played very well with these attacks. But mostly we're killing our children. That's who dies in these episodes once every 2 or 3 weeks. Okay, leads me into the last kind of self-policing. No, I have 2 more. One is John Cornyn. John Cornyn is the Texas senator who I have voted for 3 times at least. Yeah, I can't remember. Voted for him last time. I think he's a very honorable man. I'm very disappointed in you, John. Remember when the 45th president went over and agreed with Vladimir Putin and against our intelligence community, said he asked him 3 times. How come you didn't stand up at that moment and at least stop him, if not try to impeach him? That's stunning. And you, John Cornyn, you couldn't see where the NRA was going with guns, 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 guns. We're going to be a violent society. And then I know they supported yours candidacy. And you're probably thinking, well, Brad, why are you on my case? Why don't you get on Ted Cruz? I mean, he's a nutcase, Christian crusader, whatever, wacko. Yeah, he is. But I never thought he was going to stand up. I always knew he was going to be over there. I considered you an intelligent, caring, qualified, good-natured, common sense. Hell, I'm sure you are. I'm sure you're as good a person as I am. You're probably a better person than I am. But when you're sitting in the hot seat, you've got to stand up when it's vital. Like Mike Pence did. But you did nothing. Like Liz Cheney did. And if you had stood up, do you know what would have happened? You might be saying, well, Brad, you don't really understand what would have happened. Yeah, I do know what would have happened. If you'd have stood up against the NRA or these Christian crazies or any of this kind of crap that's been going on in North Texas, guess what would have happened? You would probably been voted out of office. And you know something? That's exactly what I expected you to do. Stand up even if you were going to lose the election. But stand up against these crazies. These wackos, these Bolsheviks. All they want to do is tear down. But you didn't do that. I expected more out of you. Sorry. I have one last story about standing up. And if you notice all these stories about standing up, I'm a gun owner, I'm a Christian, so I'm standing up against Christians, I'm standing up against gun owners. Here's going to be another one. This one's take me just a few moments to get there. In this book, Flying By, it talks about the MAX accidents, this MAX 737 crashes that happened. It was a new airplane. I actually flew the MAX airplane. And the bottom line is Boeing never ever told us about the MCAS system. And there was 2 crashes, and let me get to the bottom line. So this book articulates that how the Boeing CEO used denial and cover up and all that kind of stuff. And in here is just one little sentence. They were talking about Muhlenberg. He's the CEO at the time. Muhlenberg, once an eager young intern at the world's greatest aerospace company, had become the technocrat face of a deadly blunder. Among those joining in the calls for his resignation was a newspaper of his alma mater, Iowa State University. In parentheses, quoting, "As students, we must expect better from our esteemed alumni," wrote the Iowa State Daily News. Why did I bring that up? Remember back, it was about 3 or 4 years ago, immigrants were coming up on the border. We were putting the families in cages, and we were pulling kids away from their parents. It was a stunning, awful action against humanity. And I think many of us were just embarrassed that America was doing this. This is not how we should be acting. Whether you agreed with the immigrants or not, you don't pull kids apart and put them in cages and pull them away from their parents. Well, the person that was the architect of that in the administration, and many of the more odious things that came out of the administration, the architect was Stephen Miller. Guess which school Stephen Miller went to? Duke University. I went to Duke University. So did my wife. I think I should have stood up when Stephen Miller was perpetrating this against humanity. And in the eyes of the world, we look like hypocrites. Probably the nicest thing to say. I think if members in alumni at Duke University, we should have stood up against him. And you say, "Oh no, Brad." I said, "Well, wait a second. If we can root for Coach K publicly, then we can self-police our own when they're out of line." And I hope most of the Duke alumni thought it was an awful thing against humanity. And by the way, you're saying, "Oh, well, Brad, that's just excessive. That's silly." No, this self-policing, we have got to take responsibilities for our own tribes and stand up against them when they don't use common sense, when they don't use common decency, and when they've lost sight of what's right and wrong. And if Iowa State can do it against an airplane that never should have been put in the air, then I should be able to do it against putting kids in cages as an alumni. Okay. I'm so sorry. Or no, I'm not. If you're still listening, thank you. I've tried to cover the waterfront a bit. I've tried to be encouraging, but I also didn't shy away from the tough issues, which, by the way, if you're sitting in the hot seat, flying an airplane, or I keep saying, well, because I sit in the hot seat, I was flying the airplane, and I was in a stressful situation with the captain. That another role that many of us play that's just as tough? Parenting. But you somehow got to make a safe landing. When the environment's changing, you have limited resources, and there aren't any good options. that's when you kind of determine your character. Safe landings, everyone.